Hey, I'm Ange.
And I'm Beck.
And we are the Gold Diggers, because we believe there's gold found in everyone.
Everyone is unique, interesting and exciting with a great story to share.
And we'd like to find the gold in you.
Honey, you're my sugar.
So this is how it works. One of us usually doesn't know our guest and the other does. But today it's a little bit different because we have Jenny GILPIN in the chair with us. Welcome, Jenny.
Good morning. Welcome, Jenny.
Now, Jenny is an international speaker and shares her story all over the world. So Beck is familiar with her story.
Yes, I did happen to attend an event last night that Jenny spoke at, so I do know her story.
So we know her story. So this time I'm not actually going to send Beck out of the room.
No.
But Beck, I do want to talk about a conversation before we get into Jenny's before we get into Jenny's story.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about a conversation that we had. I'm going to drop you right in it. We go walking every week.
Okay. Yes.
And Beck just happened to drop the fact that she can recite the entire McDonald's menu from the 90s.
Are we going to hear this?
Do you remember the ad? And look, if it was on now, I wouldn't have time to work this out. But at the time, it was a challenge to learn this ad, and I did it.
I think you should do it. Come on.
Oh, no. Okay. Here goes. I'll have a Big Mac, quarter pounder fillet of fish McFeast as well, a junior burger and cheeseburger, chicken McNugget 6 and 9 with 4 delicious sauces and some golden french fries, small and large serve, and to drink an orange juice, Boss Coke. No, make that Diet Coke, a fan of Sprite, 3 kinds of shakes, chocolate, strawberry and vanilla, coffee, tea, hot apple pie, cookies and 3 different sundaes, hot chocolate, fudge, hot caramel, and maybe strawberry, yeah, my favourite. Maybe breakfast, English McMuffins, jam and marmalade. I love McDonald's, good time, great taste, and I get this all at one place. And I think I missed some things, but that's most of it.
Oh, my word. That's a very special superpower you have there.
That was my party trick back when I was young, and I've never forgotten it.
You must really have had a lot of McDonald's.
I did not. I didn't even like it. It was just the challenge of learning this ad. I'm just like, challenge on.
Do you know the last time I had a McDonald's burger?
Go on.
1989.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm
I've had the
surprised.
fries, but not the burger. It gave me a stomachache. I've never gone back.
I'm surprised that you even remember the year.
I do remember because I knew it was before I left Australia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talking about the 90s,
Yes.
actually myself and Jenny met in the 90s and I was 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was 16 in the 90s too.
Yeah, well,
I wasn't.
So to give our audience just a brief intro into Jenny, she is an Australian born, but not for how many years did you spend in England?
29 years.
Yeah, so for most of your life, really, you've spent overseas in England, and that's where we met. And now has recently, during COVID, returned to Australia.
Yay. Because I'm from Brisbane originally, so I've come home,
Ooh.
which is very nice.
What part of Brisbane were you born in?
Oh, this is the question. You know why I'm going, because I was brought up in Ascot.
Oh, right.
Whenever I say that, oh, were you? Now? Okay.
It's the same Ascot in England, isn't it? That would be the same.
Yes.
It's
yeah.
it's a posh area.
Spot. Yeah.
But you do refer to yourself as Jenny from the block.
I do, but I deliberately do that because I just try. You know when people sometimes they get a little bit intimidated, maybe
Yes.
when you're talking to them.
Yeah.
Just when you're a public speaker. So I deliberately do that just to
Break the ice.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into your story in a moment, just the circumstances around your birth to where you are now. But I also know you spent some time building a number of women's homes in the UK.
Yes, I
was
did,
an anti-trafficking organisation. You help rescue people from the sex trade.
Yep.
And so I want to talk about that as well, if you can cover that. So, but maybe we'll just go back to the origins of your birth.
Yes. So the gritty
Go
story.
for it. Let's dive straight in the deep.
So I didn't actually know the actual details of my birth till I was 28, but I always knew I was adopted. So I was given away at birth. But I discovered when I was 28 that I was actually the baby of a gang rape. So it's very, very gritty. And my birth mother's an amazing lady, considering that people would encourage people to give babies like that, like to abort babies like that. So she's very brave to have actually gone through and kept me. So, so I feel myself very blessed to even actually be alive, to be honest.
Yeah.
So she went through with it and with a lot of stigma too
Yeah.
in the 60s when she had me.
Yeah, and you didn't know your birth mother, did you, for a long period of time?
No, I met her when I was 28 years old. Obviously, I found her through getting my original birth certificate. I've just noticed that I'm starting to go up on the end of my sentences.
Welcome back to
because I'm
Australia.
back to Australia. So
Yeah, you
Aussie
don't sound too
girl.
British, I think.
there's a couple of words. Just beautiful is
Oh,
what
yeah.
I've maintained. I found her by getting my original birth certificate. And it had her name on it and where she was from when I was born. And it was a cattle station. So I wrote to the cattle station, and that was been handed down through the family. So her brother was still on the property. So it was quite easy in that sense to find her.
Yeah.
And she always said to me, she said, in my heart, I thought if you ever found me, I would be open to that. But she said, I'd never look for you because that wasn't my right because I gave you away.
Wow.
So she hadn't told any of her family, any of her children about my existence though. So
Did she have you first, or did
I
you
was
have
first?
Okay.
Yeah, so she was 19.
Right.
And then she went on and got married and had 5 more children.
Right. Wow.
And has she ever told you the circumstances behind what happened?
Yes, so she was a student nurse in which hospital was it? The Mater in Brisbane, in South Brisbane, and she was walking home from a shift and was gang raped in South Brisbane. And so she said in the 60s, like, she didn't report it because the culture then for women was, well, you had it coming for you almost. Like she wouldn't be sort of believed. So she never actually even reported it. And then obviously discovered she was pregnant and spent almost her entire pregnancy in a single mother's home in Brisbane. Because they just hid you away then.
Yeah. So her parents hid her away, did they?
Yes, because it was it's like a stigma, wasn't
Yeah,
it? You
yeah.
know, back in those days, even to have a baby out of wedlock, let alone the circumstances. They basically just hid her away.
Wow.
She's only 19. I mean, she said to me recently, because my birth mum's still alive, she said to me recently it was very traumatising. And actually me turning up, she says it's actually made a very good thing out of what was a very hard season of her life.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
So like,
that
how
we've
do you
been-
overcome something like that?
Yeah.
She is actually a force to be reckoned with, my birth mum.
Wow.
She's 5'1". I don't know what that is in centimetres, but she's short. And but she's a go-getter.
Wow.
I think she's got a winery science degree, a nursing degree, because they owned a winery as well.
Wow.
Long story.
So great determination.
Yes.
Because that would have been hard to carry all those years. And I guess you turning up would have been somewhat healing for her as well.
I think it was healing and
Yeah.
confronting because
Yeah.
she had to tell her children about me.
Right. How did that go?
I had the youngest is a sister, so she was finally delighted to have a sister because she's got 4 big brothers.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But they were all very welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say now they're more friends than your family's who you're brought up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now I'm back in Australia. I'm probably having a renewed relationship with my birth mum, which is lovely.
Do you love seeing the family familiarity? Do you see things like
That was really nice to see, to finally look like somebody, because I do look like my birth mum,
right?
just
yeah.
a lot taller version.
Yeah.
But
And
that's really
siblings?
nice.
Do you see yourself in your siblings?
In a couple of them,
Yeah.
couple of them look like their dad,
Yeah.
but a couple of them look like my mum,
Yeah.
and so I sort of fit in there. It's very interesting actually to know what's inherited and what's learnt.
Yeah.
So my mum that brought me up is a bit of a wallflower and quiet and kind, and my birth mum's like the go-getter public speaker.
Wow.
So and the sportswoman.
Wow.
So that's because one of my brothers played rugby for Australia.
Yep.
So there's a big sport theme in the family.
Yep.
And then my family I was brought up in hated sport, but I always loved it.
Oh, wow. Isn't
So
that
it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And do you find you have similar mannerisms? Does that come out?
Oh, I don't know. I've never studied that.
Yeah. I know
I
with
don't
especially my eldest daughter, will laugh the same, and then we'll laugh at each other laughing at the same, and we do the same hand movements. And I wonder
And
if
she's
that's
this
just,
spitting image of you.
we're like twins, but mother-daughter twins.
That would be I actually maybe think I should look for it now, because I know with my
Yeah.
husband and son,
Yeah.
and I walk behind them, it's the same person.
Yeah, wow.
The way they walk's the same.
I once had a friend who was adopted and then found her birth mum later in life. But she always felt in her adopted family that she dressed differently. She was a bit bohemian, had sort of dreadlocks. But her family were very straight-laced people. And so she always felt like, maybe, I don't know why she'd got this sort of different dress sense and that. Anyway, she met her birth mum
Yeah.
when she was an adult, and it was almost like looking in the mirror.
It's
That,
amazing,
her
isn't
mum,
it?
I think, had dreadlocks.
It's
And
amazing what you inherit and you don't even
Yeah.
know is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm interested, though, for what was that period of time like for you? You'd been adopted out into this loving family, but knew that there was something missing. What was that? What led you to try and search for your birth mum?
That's a great question. Actually, I've been revisiting a little bit of that in myself recently, because when you're given away at birth, the initial ability to attach is taken away. So I was never held in my mother's arms, ever. So there's an immediate detachment that's, if you have that straight away when a baby's born, it's really intrinsic for them.
Yeah.
So there was something in me that couldn't attach to people. So I struggled to make friendships as a child. Great sense of deep inner rejection. Always thought people were talking about me unkindly. Always felt the odd one out in a room. And to some extent, that's still slightly there. But I've accepted it now because it's just who I am.
And you understand
And
it.
I understand
you
it.
know where it's come from.
So I'm not as confronted by it now. It's all like, oh yeah, there it is again.
Yeah.
Rather than believing it. Now it's more, okay.
And then you find your birth mum, and there must be this sense of, why didn't my mum want me? Why did... and then you find out the circumstances behind that. How was that moment for you?
Well, Mum that brought me up, Enid Dorothy, who's in heaven now, she was always amazing in that she said, whatever the reason is your mum gave you away must have been a very, very good reason. So I never really had it in my head, why did she do it? Because my parents were so good in that regard.
Wow.
So I never had anything against her. It was more, it was lovely to find her.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know where you come from.
Yeah.
Like, that's always been a bit strange.
Even just from a medical perspective,
Yeah.
actually having that history is important.
You just didn't have any history. I didn't even know what I weighed until I got my original birth certificate
Yeah, wow.
when I was born, or, didn't know any of it.
Yeah,
Didn't even know where I was born.
Yeah.
It's so lovely that your like Enid, that your adopted parents were so caring in how they nurtured that knowledge of your original mother, your biological mother.
They my two mothers.
Yeah.
They met and they spent some time together.
Wow.
Which was rather confronting, having two mothers in a room.
Yeah.
Talking about you. But then when Mum passed, my birth mother came to the funeral.
Oh, wow.
And then my big brother, who was also adopted, his birth mother. So they met at my mum's funeral,
Wow.
which was a very full circle moment.
I imagine they would have been so grateful to your adopted mother
Yeah.
for looking after you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's my mum that brought me out was this very special, very well-balanced lady.
Yeah.
So just talk us through the moment where you discovered that you are the product of a gang rape.
That was a tough day.
Yeah.
I think you build it up because you think you're going to get certain answers from it.
Yeah.
And then you discover, like that moment was horrible, actually.
Mm.
I'm a very, very straight-laced girl, really, and I went out and got my ears pierced a second time that afternoon. That's a big rebellion for me.
Thankfully, that's all it was.
It just made you feel very lost.
Yeah.
And strangely, the same day, we went up to Toowoomba to meet the rest of the family that afternoon. And I was just reeling.
Wow.
I was just reeling.
Yeah.
That's overwhelming.
It was completely. So I met all my siblings. I met her husband.
yeah.
I met my grandma, who's passed now, but I met her
Yeah.
aunts and uncles. They're all there. So it was a little bit odd.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was like you felt like you were being like a product that was being assessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're still dealing with the whole
Yeah, it was
impact
massive.
of- yeah.
It took a long
Because
time.
he's half of you, like, you know, he's a part of you. This is DNA and that, and so that must be really confronting for you, that your whole family, you've reconnected with your birth mum's family, but that this is a really horrific event that they're remembering. Has had any impact on you at all?
About what? Sorry.
Just the fact that they can separate themselves from
Yes.
that event, but
Yeah.
in some ways you can't, because it's part
No.
of your DNA.
I don't. That hasn't had an effect on me, because at times I wonder why, with certain times, I'm not included with things,
Yeah.
and I realise it's because they don't understand it,
Mm.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to understand that and how that affects you
Yeah.
unless it's you, and it probably doesn't enter into people's heads to think about it. My birth mother, though, mother is very sensitive to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And the amazing thing about you is that really you're speaking all over the world. You've been on many different platforms and you're always inspiring and encouraging people, and with a great message about identity. I think most people that would have come from those circumstances, that would be one of their biggest struggles, is identity and that sense of belonging. How have you overcome that?
I think I was given a beautiful advantage of incredible parents, an advantage of great faith in God,
Yeah.
and also I'm married really young to a great man.
Yeah.
I was going to ask
Yeah.
you, can you tell me how you met Dave?
Oh, yes. We met in King George Square in Brisbane.
Nice, yeah.
And it was a girl I went to school with, who I went to a Presbyterian Sunday school till I was 11.
Yeah.
And it was a girl that I knew that knew Dave, and she introduced us. So I was 18,
Yeah.
and Dave went home that night and told his friends he'd met his wife.
Oh, nice.
And he was 24. So it was very instantaneous.
Yeah.
So we were actually engaged within 3 months.
I was going to say, because you said last night you got married at 19. So now when you're saying you met at 18, I'm like, that was a quick engagement.
Speedy Gonzales.
Yes.
When you know, you know.
Yeah. Within a year, almost a year to
Wow.
the day. I think
Love
it was
at
2 weeks
first
over a
sight.
year we got married.
Amazing.
So we've been married 37 and a half years.
And had you told him everything that you just discovered about yourself?
I was still discovering it, because obviously I was married to Dave for 8 years
Yeah.
before I found my birth mum.
Of course, yeah.
So he knew that I was adopted and that, but
Yeah.
this was a journey we went through together, really.
Yeah.
But it was a bit of a journey into purpose for me, really,
Yeah.
because when you understand who you are and why you are the way you are,
Yeah.
it gives you a bit more of a sense of what you're called to do.
Yeah.
So I think my discovering and understanding my identity is
Yeah.
probably why I speak so, because you always speak out of your weakness, really.
Mm.
You get strength in your weakness, and then
Yeah.
you speak out of your weakness.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, like last night, you're speaking to these two women at this women get together that we had, and really speaking into these things that you've carried your whole life can be broken. Like you can find healing in that. And that was really powerful. And I can see how your experiences and your journey to break through that and to live your fullness of your purpose has really stemmed from that, hasn't it? And is now making way for others. And that's
I think
beautiful.
everybody has to. It's an interesting thing in the modern age, right?
Yeah.
In that people are encouraged to be victims in a way,
Mm.
and I would encourage people not to be a victim,
Mm.
because there comes a point in your life that you can't blame anybody else
Mm.
for what's going on in your life. You've got to decide, okay, I'm going to make steps to get better.
Yeah.
And I think probably the ability that I have that I have today is
Yeah.
because of 1,000 small decisions,
Yeah, great.
you know,
Yeah.
that, oh no, I'm not going to be victim to that.
Yeah.
because you can get to like 80 years old and still be carrying stuff that you really don't have to carry.
That's right. It's like
So it's
an
just-
anchor, isn't it? It
Yeah,
just weighs
yeah.
you down. You can either carry that heavy weight with you or let it go and move forward without it.
It's always there
Yeah.
because you can't run away from what you've experienced.
Yeah.
But it's what you do with it that counts, I think.
I'll just pull out the word victim because I know that you have obviously worked with girls that you've rescued from the sex trafficking industry, if we can call it that, trade.
Trade, yeah.
And you don't call them victims, you call them survivors, which I love. Just talk us through what got you started in...
Okay. Yeah, so what happened...
Was it called City Hearts?
It was called City Hearts.
Yeah.
I think they've changed the name just recently, but it was
Yes.
City Hearts. So originally, out of this discovery
Yeah.
about my life, I thought, well, what am I called to do with this? So I started one house with one girl originally, just for more life-controlling issues.
Yeah.
And we've been going about 2 or 3 years, and the police in South Yorkshire, which is where we were in England, approached us and asked, would we start to take girls that are identifying as trafficked. So this was in the early days when it wasn't a very well-known issue. So we were looking after girls for a number of years, completely free of charge, just helping the police out.
Yeah.
And then from that, it really grew. And we ended up subcontracted to the British government and had 14 houses. And there were men, women and children. So it wasn't just women rescued from sex trafficking. It was men from labour exploitation, whole families.
Wow.
So it was a privilege to do, but the stories were like insane.
Wow.
Yeah. So it grew. It was wonderful in the end because we ended up having incredible partnerships as well with major department stores and employers and stuff in England where we could get survivors actual work.
Yeah.
Because you had to give them an ability to get back on their own feet. People don't want handouts forever.
Yeah.
They want to be able to support themselves and lead a normal life.
Yeah.
So it was quite amazing to be able to track through rescuing them, giving them hope back, settling them in the community, helping them get work, and then becoming tax-paying contributors to the society.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
So you were working with, I guess, the police, where they would identify
Yes.
the soon-to-be survivors
Yep.
and house them with you.
Yes.
So then this obviously has to be all undercover. Nobody can know locations of premises,
No.
even what you do.
No.
Was there ever any security threat for you?
There was a couple of times. There was one time there was a blacked out car in front of my house.
Wow.
But that was because I turned my location services on. I shouldn't have done it.
Oh, right.
So it was just a moment of, I think we were selling a house or something, and I put up a picture.
Right.
But they bit off more than they can chew because my neighbour was a undercover detective.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
wow.
And he took the number plate because he knew what I did.
That's handy to have. a
Yeah,
neighbour
so that was
like
quite
that.
handy.
Yeah.
And I don't get easily threatened.
Wow.
And then there was one other time, actually, it was interesting. There was a staff member sitting having lunch in the city, and someone at the next table was asking, with a very foreign accent, was asking, did anybody know where the City Hearts houses were?
Oh, wow.
So within a couple of hours, we had moved those clients to another city.
Right.
Wow.
So
That was fortunate. You just happened to be there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
fortunate.
Yes.
Yes, very fortunate. And actually, that was
Or Providence.
Providence. Yeah. So it was interesting because that afternoon, it was a Sunday, and I was walking down the side of our building into a church service,
Yeah.
and this guy walked past me with a foreign accent,
Yeah.
Wow.
and I thought, too late, they're already moved. So we didn't even have to confront it.
Wow.
Interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Amazing.
So that's only the 2 times. Sadly,
Yeah.
people think that you're under more threat than you are because, sadly, these survivors, they're dime a dozen for traffickers,
Yeah.
so they can go and get more.
Yeah.
So if a woman, say, got pregnant, we would constantly being referred clients who were 8.5 months pregnant and were just dumped on bus stops or whatever to fend for themselves.
Yeah.
So they'd be with us a matter of weeks and they were giving birth to these babies.
Yeah.
And the traffickers just find more. It's a horrific cycle.
What's fascinating about that to me is that, you know, you're helping girls that have been abused in the worst possible sense and have children as a result of that. And that really is your background that you discovered.
It's full circle, isn't it?
During that time. Had you already started City Hearts before you discovered that?
No.
Okay.
No. So I started City Hearts as a definite result of finding out where I came from and deciding that I needed to do something with that.
Wow.
Rather than it just being a stamp on my identity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a very full circle moment when I walked into, we had drop-ins in multiple cities where survivors would come in once a week. And I walked into a foyer once and there was about 35 prams. I've actually got a photo of it on my phone. There was about 35 prams sitting there.
Wow.
And I realised, oh, okay, so these are all me, babies of rape. It's a very, very special moment.
Yeah.
And these mums, you know, some of these surviving women were the strongest people you could ever meet.
Wow.
The stories and the things that they had survived and been through.
Yeah.
And they were incredible mothers.
Yeah.
They just poured out love on these little babies.
Yeah.
And it was astonishing and beautiful to watch.
I guess they go into overprotective mode, wouldn't they? Because they know the dangers that are out there. They've experienced them. So it would be like this whole motherly, no one's going to touch my child like that.
And also a lot of them came from poverty backgrounds. So a lot of what the traffickers would do, they would spot women that were disadvantaged or estranged from their families or whatnot because they were easy to traffic. So a lot of these women, when they had the babies, for them that was family.
Yeah.
They suddenly had their own family.
Yeah.
So it's very, very special.
And what are the circumstances behind how they got trafficked in the first place? Were they very different?
They were different, but the underlying facts are pretty similar. So it's very poverty based.
Okay.
They often were offered jobs in the UK, and it was probably a lot more open when UK was part of the EU than it is now.
Right.
But they were offered jobs. They were offered a better life.
Yeah.
So they were brought over to the UK from all over the earth, not just Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And then when they arrive, their passports are taken away and their families are threatened, or people they know in the country they come from are threatened.
Right.
And so they're in a corner. And then the traffickers will say, you have to pay back the money and the expenses that we had to pay for you to get here.
Right.
And for your room and board. So you can imagine that goes on forever.
Yeah.
And so they're completely beholden and they have effectively lose their identities because their passports are taken away.
Yeah.
So they're just beholden to this whole system. Sadly, oftentimes a lot of the women in particular are often trafficked by family.
Yeah.
Like uncles or very, very sad and depraved behaviour. They reckon it's the second biggest industry to drug trafficking in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is slavery.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And do a lot of the girls then get addicted to drugs, do they?
Yes,
Yeah.
because then what they do, they're clever, aren't they?
Yeah.
They get them addicted to substances and then they're beholden more for the price of the substances that they're feeding them.
Right.
Yeah.
As some very evil.
Yeah.
And what does
Evil
rehabilitation look like, particularly if it's family members where they're at greatest risk?
Yeah. Well, it's different in each case. So in the UK, we had to, as part of the time that the British government was paying for us to look after them, we'd have to find out whether they had leave to remain in the UK. So some of them did, and then they could start a new life. But those that the British government wouldn't allow to stay, you had to repatriate them back, and then some of them got re-trafficked.
Right.
So to completely rehabilitate somebody, you'd have to have time in order to build their trust.
Yeah.
They've got to trust you. Like, how are they going to trust you?
Yeah.
Some of them we were able to look after long enough that cases could be built against their traffickers. And so it was wonderful to see, you know, one trafficker got 14 years, another got 21 years.
Wow.
But that was more rare
Yeah.
than main game.
Did you
Really.
find that the traffic people who came to you, were they people who came to the police or people that the police sought out?
So in England, they are on it. The
Right.
government's on it. So there's a national referral mechanism.
Yeah.
So the police, they have a whole squad, a whole arm of policing where that is their job.
Wow, that's good.
So they're referring thousands of people every year.
Wow.
And like even if you go in airports in England or motorway services,
Yeah.
there's ads on the back of doors. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
If so, this is a number to call.
Yeah.
So it's a set up system
Right.
in England whereby the police rescue the traffic victims.
Must be enormous. Like there must have to be so many organisations to house all these people. 'cause
Multiple organisations.
Isn't there millions of traffic people over there per year that are found by the police? Or
I wouldn't say there'd be millions,
Yeah.
but it's definitely into the tens of thousands
yeah, amazing.
that are found every year.
Yeah.
So there's lots of miracles that we would call them that have happened in your journey. You're in the right place at
Yeah.
the right time.
Yeah.
You've used your pain, turned it into purpose, and saved and rescued many people as a result of what's happened to you. But that journey of discovery for you has still continued.
It's still going on.
It's still going, and you're still reconnecting with family.
Yes.
And you did tell me recently that there was an event that you were speaking at.
So I'll back the story up
Yeah.
so it knows how it happened. So I did Ancestry.com because I wanted to find out why I was so tall, etc. So I discovered quite a large percentage Scandinavian. So that was the tall thing.
Yeah.
But I got more than I bargained for because I got matched on Ancestry with a brother from my father's side.
Wow.
So that identified my father,
Right.
and he's passed. But it also matched me with 6 more brothers. So in the last...
So many brothers, Jenny.
Oh my goodness,
on both sides.
I'm over-brothered. There's
So have you
12
got
brothers.
12.
Well, there's one I was brought up
Yeah.
with. Let's work it out. One I was brought up with 4,
Yeah.
so that's 5 brothers and 6. There's 11 brothers.
Wow.
So in the last 18 months or so, I've met 4,
Yeah.
all in Queensland. So that's been amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in the middle of those latest 6. So there's 3 older brothers, 3 younger brothers.
Right.
And so all these years I thought I'd had just a different heart's desires that I'd love to about these brothers. But I discovered recently that about 10 years ago I was telling my story in an event in Townsville in Queensland. And I discovered recently that my father and one of my brothers was in that meeting 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
It just gets... It's actually crazier than I've
Wow.
told Angela, actually.
Oh, keep
Wow.
going.
So
Yes.
there's a lady I know really well in Queensland. I've known for a long time. And I mentioned the name of my real father. And she was brought up in the same town that he was.
Wow.
And she brings a photo up on her phone. She said, "Is this your father?" I went, "Yes." She said, "I was brought up next door."
No, you've never told me
No,
that
I haven't
part.
told you that one. Like, it just, it's
Wow.
really, like, bizarre,
Wow.
the circumstances of everything.
And how does this make you feel? Like, suddenly you've got this whole family that is it?
Well, this is why I call myself Jenny from the block. Because there's both sides of the tracks involved here. The tracks, whatever we call that in Australia. There's privilege, and there's another side that perhaps wasn't as privileged.
Yeah.
And so I sit somewhere in the middle,
Well balanced.
well balanced in the middle.
And how do they take to you?
So the latest brothers,
Yeah.
well, they didn't know I existed, did they? They only just found out I existed.
So they're more Scandinavian?
Yes, that's the
Yes.
Scandinavian side.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they are, So they're very, very interesting, I should say. A few have a few little run-ins with the law.
Right, yes. Yeah.
One of them said, Jen, what could I do better? And I said, well, stop hitting policemen would be a great start.
Yeah. Good idea.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually really feel for them.
Yeah.
Because they never had a great relationship with their dad. He was a bit of a violent man.
Yeah.
I actually would have loved to have met him, but he's passed.
Yeah.
But I would have loved
What
to
would you have
just-
said to him?
Well, he wouldn't have even known I existed either.
Yeah.
I would have said it's okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I actually don't... He did something very wrong,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but a lot of people do really wrong stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if I'd met him, I might have set his mind at ease. You remember that wrong thing you did? Well, this is the beauty that came out of the ashes. Not saying I'm beautiful or anything. I'm just saying here's a life
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's come out of those ashes. I would have loved
Yeah.
to have done that.
Amazing he was in that speaking that
Venue.
you did.
I
Yeah,
know.
the venue
I
while
know.
you were speaking.
And he would have sat
would
there
have
thinking,
known.
I did that once.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if he'd made the connection.
No, he wouldn't have done. Because he wouldn't have even known that a lady fell pregnant
Yeah.
Wow.
out of that situation.
How did
Yeah.
his children feel when they discovered that you existed?
They were trying to piece it all together. They sat down with and pieced it all together. So the story is that in the mid-60s, when this ancient piece of personhood here was born, there was 3 older brothers. Their marriage broke up for a year. So that year he was out and about doing his bits, whatever you would call all of this, violence. And I was conceived that year. Then they got back together
Right.
and then had 3 more children.
Right.
So I was sort of conceived in the middle of the marriage. So we've pieced it together now,
Yeah.
me and 4 of the brothers.
Yeah.
A couple of them don't really want to meet me, and I can completely understand
Yeah.
that. It's fine.
Yeah.
You know, they don't, for whatever reasons, that's fine. I understand that too.
And this is such a big story.
Yeah.
And like the fact that...
It's when it's your story, it doesn't feel that big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, like I'm thinking of this, you know, of you and the whole issue about identity. It must have been a theme throughout your whole life.
Yeah.
To be as strong and as confident and be able to know that you could have stood in front of your father and said that it's okay. Like, that's huge. And probably most people would never be able to get to that point. And so your faith, I know, is a really big
Very big.
anchor for you. And you've had all these support of people, a great husband and a great adoptive parents and that. But you must have had to do some personal work of your own as well.
A lot. A lot of personal work. Because it's that attachment, like I said, that's robbed from you at the beginning. With my faith in God, I've had to realise that my identity is in heaven. In other words, let me phrase that in a way that doesn't sound stupid. My identity is the fact that I am loved
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that I'm planned.
Yeah.
As strange as that sounds, that God knew about my life. And so my identity is not housed in what anybody thinks of me.
Yeah.
It's in the fact that I'm loved from the beginning. I'm not saying that happened overnight.
Yeah.
That was a journey for me.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's always a journey for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think up front you would say, oh, you're confident in this, that and the other. Well, I think inside everybody's hearts there's always a little hidden realm
Yeah.
that nobody
Yeah.
sees, that they've got to constantly
Yeah.
polish.
I think to have that foundation that you were planned,
Yes.
you were purposed,
Yes.
and you are loved, and you're worthy. That if we can all get that foundation, it doesn't matter about the circumstances of our birth. If we can all get that foundation, I think we could go on and do some incredible things like you have done, Jenny, and how you have rescued so many people, and you've turned your pain into purpose. I'm giving you your gold now, by the way.
Yes, you are.
You've turned that purpose into pain. You've turned it full circle. And to be able to impact other people's lives in the way that you do is absolute gold.
Thank you.
It would be great if we could all just learn from that example and realise that we are planned, we are purposed, we are loved, and we all have a reason to be on this planet.
Yes.
That will impact and save other people's lives. So.
You're also very courageous, like to pick up from that knowledge of what's happened to you and to press forward. And to be at peace. You're at peace now, to go through that whole journey, to find out the information, to source and not hide from it. You didn't fall in a heap. You didn't just let that become you. You've picked up and become risen above it. You've taken that story and you've made it into this beautiful gem that you share with the world to help others with. And it's not that you're hiding it, you're using it, you're pulling it out to shine a light on how others can also journey through those things and become at peace with that. There's hope. There's a future, isn't there? And
I think people, when you hide your story, things fester in the dark. But when you bring it out, it can't fester because it's got sunlight on it.
Exactly.
And I think with everybody, if they bring their story out into the open, it's got the ability to heal, and we all feel better in sunny weather. Don't we, Angela?
Yes.
I love that.
It's definitely built for the sunshine. That's great. So I want to end on a high note. So can you tell us one of the funniest moments you've had on stage? Have you ever done something ridiculous that went wrong?
Like you're going into a minefield there. Do you want like a gross thing that's happened on stage?
You
or a
just
funny
go
thing?
for whichever you prefer.
Well, the funniest one.
Right.
And yeah, I think it was funny. So, you know that saying, it's not over till the fat lady sings?
Yeah.
So there was one women's conference. I used to do a women's conference in England every year. And our normal song leader was on maternity leave. So we had borrowed this larger lass, and she was wonderful. She's just hilarious. She was song leading, and I was finishing up my message. And I didn't realise that the band had crept back up onto the stage behind me, and she was standing right behind me. And I say, "It's not over to the fat lady."
Oh, no.
And she's standing right behind me. And the whole front row, they're just laughing. And like, how do you dig yourself? Gold digger. How does the gold digger dig themselves out of that? So I just kept going. There's so many more though. There was one other moment.
How did she take it?
She thought it was hilarious.
Oh, that's good. That makes it easy.
She thought it was so funny. Yeah. So that's probably the funniest one, I think. For everybody else other than me.
Yes, yes. So you can follow Jenny Gilpin on Instagram, and I'm sure she'll be speaking somewhere near your hometown sometime soon. So check out her itinerary.
Honey, you're my sugar.
Jenny's story is so inspiring, Ange.
I know. It just keeps divulging, doesn't it? It just keeps going and going and going.
I know.
Like to discover that about your birth, but then to discover this whole family on both sides, like the mother and the father side, to actually find that information out is incredible.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, I've known Jenny and Gilpin. I've known Jenny and Dave from a distance, like just seeing them as pastors in England and things.
Yeah.
But then to know the story behind Jenny is just so extraordinary, that what she's come from and who she is today. She's just such a very powerful and impactful woman. You would never have guessed that that's where she's come from. But when you do understand that's where she's come from, you can see why she's so impactful. It's like that story has propelled her to make a difference, hasn't it?
Yeah, it almost has empowered her more.
Yeah.
It's not debilitated her in any way. In fact, it's propelled her forward.
Yeah.
So I love that moment when she talked about the girls that she's helped rescue and seeing their babies born, really it must be like looking at herself as that child. And that must give her so much more empathy, compassion and understanding in that moment, not just for the mother, but for the child.
And I love that, like, that was a deliberate decision for her once she found out what her past was or how she was conceived. The decision to go into helping those in human traffic was very deliberate from that information that she had on herself, which is amazing, isn't it? Like,
and knowing that this is risky.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some severe security risks around that, and she was prepared to take that chance.
Yeah, very courageous woman she is. Yeah.
Just incredible. I'm so inspired. I love stories like that where people have just the most difficult circumstances to overcome, almost as if it would wipe you out.
Yeah.
But they turn that on its head.
Yeah.
And they use it for good.
Yeah.
And I just think that's incredible.
Amazing. Another amazing story.
So that's it for today's podcast. You'll find us on all the major podcast platforms. The podcasts come out every Wednesday. We'd love to hear from you on our socials, the Gold Diggers Podcast. Tell us about your story so we can find the gold in you.
Easy as pie, lemon, apple or cherry. Loving you is so very sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be such a piece of cake? And your smile is the icing. Loving you is a party. Honey, you're my sugar.